My name is Ben Alsop. I am the Citi Money Gallery Curator at the British Museum. And welcome to my corner. I've always been interested in museums. As a child, I was kind of the annoying kid who'd want to go to a museum when I was spending time with my relatives, or was on a holiday or on a school trip. And it didn't really matter what museum, but I remember them having quite an effect on me. So I remember going to like the Dorset Tank Museum and leaving there and wanting to be, involved in tanks, a driver tank, for instance. And then I remember going to the Yelverton Paperweight Museum and wanting to be a paperweight. But whatever the museum I went to, it's kind of, I really enjoyed the atmosphere, and I never really thought I'd be a curator because I didn't even know what a curator was. I didn't understand the whole infrastructure that goes behind a museum. And luckily, through volunteering, through a study that I did, I kind of found my way into the British Museum, and then I've been here for something like 8 years, and it's an amazing place to work. So my job here at the British Museum is as the Citi Money Gallery Curator. Now this gallery charts over 4,500 years of monetary history. But also, we tell a history of the world through money. Now, money is that great kind of through line through history. It touches all manner of different areas of society and all four corners of the globe. What you think about money is exactly the same as what someone thought about, 50 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. It still consumes people in the same way, and that's what I find fascinating. Charting a history of money, you can also see the history and movement of ideas, of religions, of politics. You will see portraits of some of the most famous and influential people in history, but you also see objects that just ordinary people have been using for 4,500 years. And that's the thing that I find most fascinating, I suppose. It's that idea that what we have in the gallery touches all elements of society. And it's something which you, when you enter the gallery, immediately have an affinity with. You don't need to know a great deal about the history of money. You know what money is and you know how it affects you, and therefore you can put yourselves in the shoes of someone 2,000 years ago. The way the Citi Money Gallery works is, on one side, it's how money is used by those in power, so central banks, authorities, rulers. And on the other side, it's actually how money is used in general society, because there can be a tension between those two things. And I particularly love the way money is used once it's entered into general society, into public usage. So what I want to draw your attention to is one particular object that I find fascinating, and one which, through social media and through trying to talk about the object to the general public, I actually found out more information than I knew to begin with, and the department knew when it came into the collection. So let me show you something. So if I show you this, which is a shilling coin of George V. He's got a wonderfully kind of big bushy moustache on one side. Now, if you see this as a coin, that's fine, but you could also see it as a canvas. So you could see it as a material on which you can use to send a message or make an inscription or do a design. And that's what drew me to one particular object that we have. What someone has done is they've taken a 1 shilling coin, and on the other side, they've written a message, and they've written a message of love from Fred to a lady called Nellie. And he wrote this in 1916, and on it he inscribed the word France. Now these kind of fit into this whole idea of love tokens, and we have a number of these in the collection, and they date back to 18th and 19th centuries, when they were at their height, when they were used most famously by people who had been convicted of a crime and were to be sent to penal colonies in America or Australia, committed a crime in Britain. And so they would take a coin, they would smooth it down, and they would put a message on it. Things like, "To my loving mother from your unfortunate son," or "When this you see, remember me." And they used it because coins are durable, so you come into the Citi Money Gallery, you will see thousands of years worth of coins, and some of them, especially the gold and the good quality silver, looks as good as the day it was made. These are durable objects. And often they are some of the best objects to tell us about society when no other objects exist. So anyway, this guy Fred, took a coin, smoothed down one side, and wrote a message of love. Now, using one of these, which is a register. So every object that comes into the museum is given an independent registration number, its own very own independent registration number. Now, nowadays we do it digitally, but before the dawn of computers, if you can imagine such a thing, we used to write it all down. So this is a register, and in it I'm looking for a particular reference to this token that I mentioned. So this is here, and the reference itself, it says very little indeed. It simply says that the token came into the museum presented by Mrs. Carvel of Hampstead in 1966. Now, I have no other information. So I wanted to maybe find out more about who this Fred and Nellie were. I mean, I didn't really hold out much hope. As I said, we didn't have really much information to go on. So I wrote a blog, and the blog was put up onto the British Museum website. And in it, I explained the coin, how it fits into our wider collection, how it's on display in the Citi Money Gallery, and how it'd be amazing if we could maybe find out some more information. And so this coin was tweeted, this love token was tweeted by the British Museum, and it did rather well. It was retweeted by Gary Kemp from Spandau Ballet, which is interesting because it's a silver coin, and I think he was more interested in gold. And then just a few weeks later, the museum was contacted by a lady called Joy. Now, she came up with some really compelling evidence that suggested that the Fred and Nellie on this coin were actually her grandparents. She said that they were married in 1916, her grandparents, Fred and Nellie. They were married actually in London. He went off to the Somme in 1916 and fought in the First World War. And in 1966, which was when the token actually came into the museum's collection, so it's at this point that we record it in a book such as this, is the year that Nellie died. Now, we can never be certain that this is the Fred and Nellie mentioned on the coin, but rather wonderfully as well, Joy did send an image, a photograph of Fred and Nellie, and there they are on their wedding day, if I remember rightly, and there's Fred in his uniform, and there's Nellie sitting by his side. So what I particularly found fascinating about this story and find fascinating about this object is it's taking something really everyday, really utilitarian. It's a coin, they're mass produced, but they're completely changing the nature of it. It's no longer a coin to be used in exchange or trade or to pay for something. It becomes a testament to two people's relationship. So an image has been removed from it, and on it has been inscribed this message from Fred to Nellie, France 1916. The words are simple, there's no great kind of flowery language, but you know exactly what is being said. And of course he's making this token not entirely sure if he'll come back from France in 1916. And so it really does show that these objects, which are kind of utilitarian and very usable and very disposable to some extent, can actually become something really fascinating and talk not of money, talk not of trade and exchange, which obviously are very important parts of human history, but they can also just talk about human relationships. So if there was a curator I'd like to swap corners with, then it would probably be my colleague Eleanor, who works in the Asia department. She works with the Korean Gallery, and it's a gallery like the Citi Money Gallery, which combines both the contemporary and the ancient. So I'd love to find out more about what she does.